attending.
Okay, so I think that we can start. Thanks for connecting to this seminar. The speaker today is Professor Laura Bonanni from University of Chieti. The title of the presentation in the artist's brain at the frontier of human experience. You see that this is a seminar organized in the framework of Sapienza for Brain Awareness Week. This year, the week is in March this week, and is launched by Dana Foundation, a private philanthropic organization supporting brain research, but also the organization of outreaching events to popularize the neuroscience at all levels. The topic today is a real challenge because it's a real complex phenomenon of creativity and innovation in the art work and the representations. And people think that artists can capture a unique photograph from human lives and emotions. And this new angle is something similar to the discovery of new continents and lands for other people that can share this kind of new angle to see their lives and emotions, feelings, and so on. There is also a new chapter of neuroscience and neuroaesthetics launched by Samir Zeki, investigating the elementary neural mechanisms at the basis of experience of artworks and arts in general. So brain research is focusing on the features of the brains of artists, but also the brain responses to artworks in ordinary people. So it will be not easy to integrate these two dimensions in a talk, in a scientific talk. It's a mission impossible. But we have a special speaker today, Professor Laura Bonanni, is Associate Professor of Neurology at the Department of Neuroscience, Imaging and Clinical Science at the University of Chieti Pescara. And she developed a lot of studies and published a lot of papers about brain correlates in patients with Lewy body diseases and Alzheimer's disease. Even if she's so young, covers a lot of very important positions in boards of Italian Society of Neurology and Dementia and the European Consortium of Dementia with Lewy body. And today we have also the chair of the European Consortium, Professor Daga Arslan, and also board of Lewy body disease and professional interest area of Alzheimer's Association. So it's a great pleasure to kindly ask Professor Laura Bonanni to upload her presentation and starts with the symposium. I kindly ask attendees to ask questions by the chat. So at the end of the presentation, I will read the questions for Professor Laura Bonanni.
Thank you so much, Claudio, for this invitation. I'm very honored to give this seminar at La Sapienza on a topic that is pretty new for me, but very fascinating. So you started by saying a big truth, which is that it's impossible, it's a mission impossible to explain all the concepts that actually connect neurology or neuroscience to the arts in one talk, in a 30-minute talk, and a big lie, which is that I'm young. But anyways, I'm here trying to discuss with you in a very, let's say, unconventional way, some of the concepts that can be disentangled between neurology and the arts. So basically what we can say is that the production of a representational art is one of the most complex and intangible human behaviors. It's a form of expression which is almost as old as the modern human species and far predates evidence of written communication. The earliest known rock art were found in Africa, arguably, and that's back like about 75,000 years ago, with the cave art found in the caves of Chauvet, Lascaux, and Altamira in France and Spain, more recently, dating back roughly 40,000 years from now. Neurological and neuroimaging research concerning representational drawing or art previously focused upon the putative distinct roles of the two cerebral hemispheres with different drawing pathologies manifesting with left and right brain damaged patients. This was compounded by the popularity of the so-called drawing on the right side of the brain, which was developed by Edwards in late 80s of the last century, which conjectured that switching into a right mode with an engagement with the right side of the brain and its putative holistic perceptual processes can help even the novices to master representational drawing skills. Even though Edwards was actually influential, the use of right and left in the text of his production, his books, was to a large extent more metaphorical than neuropsychological. This is because neuropsychological research into constructional apraxia implicates brain regions that underpin the integration of multimodal perceptual data, largely involving the parietal cortices. And these are actually the studies made by Gainotti, who is an Italian neuroscientist. In his critique of judgment, Immanuel Kant affirmed that aesthetic judgments are based on feeling of pleasures and must be distinguished from cognitive judgments based on perception. Kant's distinction is a useful introduction to all neurobiological studies of the difference between objective cognitive judgments based on perception and those based on feeling of pleasure. Kant made other distinctions within aesthetic judgments, considering, for example, some to have a cognitive basis and others not. His views is actually in opposition to those of others who claim that feelings associated with judgments of beauty have no cognitive content, for example, Hume, or that beauty judgments are about objective properties. And these are the studies by Baumgarten. Neuroaesthetics is all of a new field that was developed by, as Claudio said, Semerzecki in the 90s years of the last century. And neuroaesthetics is a science or a subclass of a neuroscience, which aims to understand which are the brain mechanisms that are engaged during aesthetic and other experiences in the widest sense. Of course, it encompasses a vast area. It amounts to trying to understand and knowledge what are the neural mechanisms underpinning inherited aesthetic predispositions compared to acquired ones. The extent to which aesthetic judgments are subjective and the relationship of aesthetic and perceptual judgment to the experience of pleasure, desire, love, hate, among other topics, with all the complexity that such sentiments involve. Neuroaesthetic researchers are also studying the activation of reward systems and the default mode network when viewing or creating art. So there is an interconnection between the artist and the perceiver of the art. The reward system releases feel-good brain chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, or oxytocin that trigger sensations of pleasure and positive emotion. We see these pleasure centers light up in the brain when we are both creating and beholding the arts or engage in different aesthetic experiences. The default mode network, once associated solely with daydreaming, is now thought to be linked to many different functions core to human connections and well-being. These may include personal identity, sense of meaning, empathy, imagination, creativity, as well as embodied cognition, which allows us to place ourselves in a piece of a artwork and make us feel what the artists are actually feeling. This is a study by Bessel, which was published in 2012, where basically by using fMRI and neuropsychological tests, it was possible to see that when exposed to art and when the public of these, the attending parts of the arts are exposed to something that is called beautiful by the most part of the audience, the default mode networks lights up. And it lights up in different way when clustering the sensations that were made by the artist or the artwork as clustered as fear, sadness, confusions, or disgust, in opposition with beauty, pleasure, and joy. So our brain reacts in different way, activating our self-experience based on the default mode network in a manner that it is actually, let's say, connected to a specific sensation or cluster of sensations. The way in which the arts are reinforced in the brain to reward pleasure and fear circuitry confirms that there is a link to our survival as a species, according to evolutionary biologists, for example, Wilson. The arts still serves the primal function today, helping us, for example, to communicate and connect, much as they did in our evolutionary past. So we are actually designed for aesthetic experiences from the mundane to the sublime. And for example, the philosopher Dennis Dutton, in his book, The Art Instinct, argues that the drive to make art is encoded in our genes, basically going all the way back to the DNA of our earliest ancestors. Another scientist, the anthropologist Helen Dissanayake, agrees that art has played an essential role in our evolution and ability to adapt. And in 1995, she wrote in her book Homo Aestheticus that self-expression and the creation of art is a basic human need. We can say that creativity and innovative thinking have been a vast construct of questioning to psychologists, therapists, and even scholars, and more lately neuroscientists. And creativity appears in various diverse models, tones. The creative contribution of artists that we deem as extraordinary, or even designers, inventors, or scientists attract our considerations. They express the foundations of our cultures and provide some breakthrough influencing cultural development and progress. Therefore, creativity can be considered as a crucial operator of human progress. Nevertheless, not every person who is an artist, inventor, or scientist is similarly creative, nor all the creative or innovative individual artists, inventors, or scientists are great artists or scientists. Some are innovative in business or communication with other individual, or just in other experiences of life. The field of creative cognition actually deals with the understanding of the cognitive processes underlying creative performance. There is a pioneering study by Mednick in 1962 linked to the concept that creativity can be connected to associative thinking. This interpretation was not directed to any specific field of applications, such as art or science. Instead, it was attempted to define processes that underlie all creative thoughts. An extension of Mednick theory was actually performed very recently in 2010 by Rosman and Fink, which investigate the relationship between individual differences in processing associative information in various aspects of creativity. It was recently proposed a close connection between associative processes and divergent thinking, which is a concept that Claudio likes very much, the diverging brain, as measured, for example, by the alternate uses task. Recently, the relationship between visual art and brain functions and disease has raised considerable interest among neurologists, neuroscientists, and artists themselves. We can see here that many artists were actually affected by neurological diseases. For example, Frida Kahlo has spina bifida. Chuck Close has a prosopagnosia linked to a stroke in the right part of the brain. Stevie Wonder has synesthesia. Woody Guthrie had Huntington's chorea, and Charles Buddy Bolden had schizophrenia. Vincent van Gogh is one of the most known examples of a great artist with neurological or psychiatric disorders. He had epilepsy, he was diagnosed as schizophrenia. And definitely this emergence of artistic capability or ability in people with neurological diseases is fascinating. Basically, brain disease may lead to change, dissolution, or even an emergence of artistic creativity. Visual artistic production is often impaired in individuals with focal or generalized brain disorders, be they either acute or slowly progressive, but sometimes, on occasion, in some of them, probably the greatest of them, however, the development of neurological disorder may be associated with new special approaches to art production and may even become an artistic theme in itself. So we can say that accordingly, the notion of creative cognition can be conceptualized within an evolutionary framework, namely, for example, impulses or inhibition. And therefore, it might be that creativity is possible to be originated from an optimal balance between spontaneous and controlled processes. It was hypothesized by Dietrich in 2004 that the principal distinction between spontaneous and deliberate, so controlled, modes of processing is the approach used to depict the unconscious novel information in working memory. For example, the spontaneous process happens when the attentional system does not actively choose or decide or select, let's say, the content to become conscious. Enabling unconscious thoughts that are relatively further random, unfiltered, and unusual to be represented in working memory. On the other hand, and these actually match the studies by Semerzeki, deliberate insights are prompted by circuits in the prefrontal cortex and therefore tend to be structured, rational, logical, and corresponding to internalized values and belief system. So a delicate balance between further spontaneous processing versus, let's say, more controlled processes may likely enhance creative cognition to the extent that the default activity does not become suppressed due to the substantial need for control processing. So we can say that in these studies, basically the studies by Semerzeki, the concept is that our brain can recognize something that is related to beauty or to ugliness based on activation of specific areas in our brain. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, when we are exposed as a species of human beings to beauty, and for example, activation of amygdala or venula when we are exposed to something that is ugly and maybe fearful. So the ugliness is something that is connected in our primitive mode as something to be scared of, while the beauty is something that we can embrace as a human species, as part of our human experience. So basically, all the studies that I'm reporting here in a very short resume of what we can say about neuroaesthetic is that I'm just leaving the sharing of the screen. Yeah, can you see me? No? Here. Yeah. Is that the connection between the neurological sciences and the arts are probably a new frontier of studies that we can perform in many ways. For example, even neurophysiological studies that didn't report here, but there are many neurophysiological studies on EEG and that can depict what happens during artistic experience. Actually, Claudio also published many studies on EEG and on the change of the alpha waves on our cortex when we are exposed to artistic experiences that actually embrace all our human being. I'm not sure, maybe I was too short, I just finished. So thank you. If there is
thanks a lot, Laura.
To discuss.
Thanks a lot, Laura, for this very sharp overview of the complexity of the problems of artist's brain and the brain of consumers of artworks. And so I fully agree with your view that really we have several ways to capture the phenomenon. And you mentioned the initial dichotomy between appreciation of the world and understanding the world in the artworks of artists. Can you comment on this dichotomy? It seems that you do not agree with this statement. Can you elaborate this, your view? Switch on your microphone.
Yes, thank you. This was a concept that was developed in philosophy. Basically, philosophy of cognition try to have let's say a vision of the concept that is not reductionist. We can say that. So basically, what happens later on is that with, for example, with the studies of Kandel, we try to have an holistic or a unique hypothesis that link cognitive processes with emotions. So basically, it's hard to disentangle what is just cognitive and then related to perceptual sensations coming from the outwards. So basically linked to activation of parietal cortices and what happens like in our inner world. So probably there is an interconnection between activation of default mode network and our self-experience and what we remember in our life based on what we actually store in an hippocampal region and what we can perceive as sensation from the outer world. So my vision is that it's impossible to disentangle the cognitive experience for our self-experience as a species. So basically what is acquired has a combination of what is basically written in our gene code, or maybe it's just an epigenetic expression. I cannot say that it's something related to the gene expression and production of a protein, but basically there is some epigenetic phenomenon that link our experience as a species with what we see in our outer world. So basically we recognize what we are seeing because we can match it with what the experience as an individual and as a species.
Okay, and another point of your speech was about the deviance of the brains of artists, and you introduced some diseases in the neurological and psychiatric domains. And can you think that this disease is at the basis of the creativity and changing the angles to express the emotions into artworks, or to represent the external worlds with unconventional eyes, or you think that really this is only a part, a small part of the creativity of the artists? What's the weight of brain disorders in the generation of artworks?
This is a very hard question to answer, because one possibility is that the divergent brain is present in the artist, despite or beside or no matter how the neurological disease develops. So basically something that comes first. So the artist has a divergence to say brains. It's not like in the center of the Gaussian curve. It's maybe very close to an extreme. So it's likely programmed to become an artist from how he was born. And we don't know if the development of neurological diseases is also linked to the fact that he had, the artist had a divergent brain, basically a different brain from the beginning. So I mean, it makes this brain more vulnerable to diseases. We don't know that. And another way of thinking about this concept is that maybe the neurological disease or symptom can in some way unveil a possible artistic creativity that wasn't present before. There are some neurological disease patients that actually become artists when they become basically affected by the disease, or they can change the artistic production along the course of the disease. For example, let's say that Ravel, the musician, the composer, was actually affected by something that was then afterwards retrospectively diagnosed as frontotemporal dementia. He changed his way of composing his music. And when, you know, he composed the bolero, maybe he already had some perseveration linked to the frontal lobe dysfunction. So it's a very hard question to answer. If I have to answer as a neurologist, I will say that the brain disease or the neurological disease just make the brain functioning less. But if I want to reason as with a more comprehensive way of thinking, we don't know. Maybe it's just, you know, the neurological disease, by excluding some part of the cognition or the brain, may unveil some of the function of the brain that were basically covered by a normal functioning in our society. I don't know if I
it's clear. This concept triggers another question about the role of artists and artworks to improve acceptance of deviance. For example, I see that in some cases you are surprised of the way to represent the words or feeling, and you see some exaggerations, especially in the modern art, and there is a clear provocative content to leave the conventional ways, to see some concepts of social interaction, of love, or and so I wonder if artworks with these provocative contents may help people to enlarge the views, enlarge the possibility to accept different angles, different ways to live, different way to love, and so on. If there is this kind of expansion of the possibilities also for the consumers of artworks.
I think this is a very interesting point, and has two views. The first is what you actually depicted, that the artist can be a pioneer for new human experiences, let's say, or just showing the general public how are the possibilities in our emotions. And the second one can be like a didascalic value. While you were speaking, actually I was thinking about the Greek theater, the original theater, where, you know, the sentiments, the emotions were represented in a very extreme way. So he had like a cathartic value for the attendants, like showing which are the human possibility of emotions and nature, and actually allowed and teach how not to be scared of our human nature, basically. Yeah, so I think this is one of the main concepts. The creative brain can be like a pioneer for the average population, basically, to explore new horizons.
Yeah. This can be, of course, an aside function of artists in the society, and it's really interesting. Concerning the brain connectivity and functions, you introduce some circuits very important, maybe for the creation and of the artworks and the creativity and so on, the default mode networks and frontal lobe, and also I didn't remember if you mentioned the neuronal systems to understanding the acts
Yes.
of the other people and so on. So, and my point, if you think that in some cases, in some artists' brains, there is something different from the ordinary people brains, or is a sort of add-on performance on the conventional circuits to represent the words, or to represent the internal words, or to plan an action with executive functions and so on. Of course, we have different artists, different brains. We have probably some artists that are similar to engineers, or people working with some logical schemes, and other people much more spontaneous and so on. So, of course, we don't have a single unique brain model of artists. But do you think that it's just an expansion of the normal circuits and the normal brain functions, or there is different experiments of the evolution of the brain in some people?
Yeah, I think this is another very hard question to answer. What I can say is that the studies that were performed on training of novices to become artists, for example, in the School of Arts, I think they are unsatisfactory in the way that, of course, they can say, or they can see with, for example, fMRI studies or connectivity measures, that their brain change in some way. For example, the parietal lobe in the right hemisphere can be more enhanced by training, but training does not explain genius. So basically, what we can say is that we need to have an agreement of what we believe it is an artist. So artist as something that someone who can be trained is basically what was studied in this connectivity or fMRI studies, which actually don't give the answer about creativity and genius. There are some studies on autopsies of great scientists, for example, Einstein, or there were some I found that were autopsy of Lenin or other great personalities in history. And actually what was found is that, for example, in the Einstein's brain, there are 4 gyruses in the frontal lobe as compared to the 3 that we all have. So there are some structural changes or some structural peculiarity from the beginning in people who have developed later on great personalities, so as you say, divergent personalities. So we don't have the answer because our studies are based on the average population, basically. So we don't know if there is a genius brain or if a brain can be trained to be genius, which I don't believe. Basically, what I believe is that there is something written in the DNA or the structure of the brain of those people who are very localized in the extreme part of our Gaussian curve. About the mirror neurons, I didn't mention the mirror neurons, so the mirror system, because I did not mention much of other artistic experiences as compared to the basically paintings today. So, but if we will think about like theater, as I said before, or cinema or videos, basically we can definitely activate our mirror system with visual motor or motor neurons that can help us to understand and feel the empathy with the artistic production.
Okay, now another interesting point is the popular view of the brain with the right hemisphere and left hemisphere, where right hemisphere is visual spatial, so it's involved in some three-dimensional representation with some colors, some new shapes, and so on. And the left hemisphere more related to languages and also processing information or in time. Yeah. So with probably something that one can relate to the planning and logical control, but also language and maybe music and so on. So can you elaborate much more the interplay of the 2 hemispheres in the expression or experience of artworks?
Yeah, actually, as I said at the beginning of the talk, before it was considered that the artists actually work with the right brain, basically, more than with an interconnection between the 2 hemispheres. So actually intended to, at the beginning, to make the title of my presentation as a journey through the bright side of the brain. But then I changed it because while actually going through the literature, it's clear that it is not the case. Basically, the artistic production and our ability to understand arts comes from an interaction between the 2 hemispheres. So basically, we need a logical thinking to understand what is produced by a right brain, which is more linked to a wider attentional network and to a more emotional, let's say, understanding and elaboration. So basically, the interplay between the 2 hemispheres is something that is, again, in a reductional way, needed to be interconnected to understand the whole experience, to actually, let's say, live the experience of art.
Okay, and I have a final curiosity concerning gender. In your exploration of the topic, did you see some elements that can characterize the artist's brains from the point of view of a gender, of males, females, different way to experience feelings and emotions, or the social importance of some things in the world? And did you think that there is a different ways of females and males in the generation of artworks or in the experience of artworks?
I think this is another very interesting question. Again, I think the studies that are published are unsatisfactory because they are all biased by a cultural and a social way of living. I mean, the two sexes actually were not neither historically nor like now as you know, in the same position in society. This is a bias because, of course, you know, even the artistic experience and let's say production can be in some way connected with our social role, basically. So it's very hard. I didn't find any specific difference in studies, for example, on the novices who were trained to be artists. So I didn't find, like, even though we know that there are some difference in the female brain from the male brain, training actually makes the same changes in our functions in different cortical regions.
Okay, I see that you has been able to perform this mission impossible, and so thanks a lot. Just if you want to have a final words on the Brain Awareness Week, what's your view of this initiative of Dana Foundation? Is something that can really keep the interest of people, can increase the awareness on brain research, brain findings, and impact on the life of patients or patients' family. What's your view about?
I think it's a great initiative that needs to be made public, basically, to many people, especially to scholars and very young people. And the fact that they you know, they try to increase the awareness how important, like, brain studies and studies in general on neuroscience are, not only for neuroscientists but for all the society. I think it's a great great goal to achieve. And I would like to thank you to have chosen this topic, which is very unusual, and it makes us, you know, just reason about a wider way to see brain and life.
Okay, I thank you again for this really nice seminar and conversation, and I hope that we can have again another talk next year on this topic to continue this interesting discussion. And I also thanks a lot to all people for connecting to this initiative, and bye-bye to all.
Thank you. Bye.